Welcome back, everyone. So, coming up, we have our next thought leadership panel led by the wonderful Erica Childers. Erica, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jillian. Hey, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I hope you all have been enjoying the session so far and that you're getting a lot of value out of it, networking, having lots of fun. I'm thrilled to have you on our session today. I'll start with kind of an outline or sort of a description of our topic today. We're going to be talking about all things product-led growth. If you're in this session, you probably are. You probably know that product-led growth is not a trend. It's not something that happened and then is no longer with us. It's really become table stakes for high growth SaaS companies that want to leverage product-led growth as part of their overall go-to-market strategy. And so in this session, we are going to hear from Jess. We're going to hear from Kyle. We're going to hear from Allison, and we're really going to talk about how software buying behavior has changed, how product-led growth can help you get closer to where your buyers are buying and how they're buying, and how you can leverage this strategy to supercharge your growth efforts and create long-term value for your customers. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Just as a quick note, there is a Q&A or a chat panel on the side. We may have time for Q&A at the end, so definitely send in your questions. Let us know what you're thinking, and if there's time, we'll definitely get to those. To kick things off, as Jillian mentioned, hi, I'm Erica. I am the Director of Content and Brand here at Tackle. Very excited for our panel. So I'm going to have each of you give a short kind of introduction of yourselves, just to kind of let us know like who you are, tell us a little bit about your company. And then Jess, I will start with you on this one.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the time today. My name is Jess Iandiorio, and I run marketing globally for Starburst. So Starburst is a Series D tech company focused on the data and analytics space, and we work very closely with Tackle on our marketplace strategy. We have two sales motions, enterprise top-down, and we have our new PLG bottoms-up motion for a product called Galaxy. So we're very much in that just getting off the ground with both motions phase.
Perfect. Thanks for being here, Jess. Kyle, maybe you want to give us a quick hello and a quick intro of your background?
Definitely. So hi, everyone. Kyle Ployer. I'm an operating partner at OpenView. OpenView is a venture capital firm investing in expansion stage software companies, companies like Datadog, Calendly, and Expensify. And in my role, I get to work with the leadership teams of our portfolio companies around revenue growth and go-to-market strategy. And we have a special investment thesis around product-led growth. And so a big focus of my work is helping our portfolio companies either scale with an existing PLG motion or think about creative ways to apply PLG practices to a more traditional go-to-market motion.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. And Allison, last but not least, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison. I'm a solo GP investor, which means that I raised a venture fund to invest in B2B SaaS companies. I'm also an independent board director at a venture-backed company called DBT Labs, which is in the data space. And then another data management company called Commvault, which is a public company. So it's sort of fun seeing both ends of the spectrum, fast-growing, smaller company, and much larger, much older, software company as well, that's going through really interesting transformations. I used to be the COO at Gainsight, which is a customer success software company. Scale that from $1 million in ARR to north of 85 million, and spent a lot of time on our content about best practices for driving net dollar retention, which is, of course, a metric that matters a lot in the PLG world. So excited to be here today.
Awesome. I'm so excited to hear from all of you. Let's jump right in. Kyle, I'm going to start with you on this one. I kind of want to start by talking about, especially for you, someone that's really leading the discussion around product-led growth. You've done tons of articles and things on this. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you think has changed about the way that buyers today want to buy software, and even compared to like 3 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. So the term product-led growth was actually coined back in 2016, but a special sort of like secret announcement for this crew. I'm publishing a report tomorrow about what we're calling a new era for PLG, just because buying behavior has even changed in the 6 years since PLG became a concept. And so the ways of actually implementing product-led growth need to change. Some of the things that are top of mind, from my vantage point, are first off, we used to think about software investments as like optional things that we bought to maybe improve business KPIs. Now, everyone is, in the cloud. We've made V1 of our cloud investments, and it's about extending and automating those investments to drive even more business value. So essentially, instead of making our first push to the cloud, we all are cloud companies, and now we just have to drive even more business value. I think that then changes how you think about purchasing software, and you might purchase software, through things like marketplaces, right, that are leveraging existing investments you've already made. Another big trend is that users have become the new kingmakers, and so we used to sell and market to executive buyers because they're the ones who had buying authority. Now end users are going out, trying products, telling their teams about it, and then ultimately going to their boss saying, "Hey, we're using this. We want to buy this product." And so now it's important to not just reach that executive buyer, but actually solve user specific pain points and build a user experience that folks love and want to evangelize. And then a third is, this is a buzzword, but low code, no code technologies. Essentially, what they did is they turned just about everyone into a software developer. And so it used to be that integrating software or customizing software was something that you had to have specialized training and resources to be able to do. Now, kind of everyone can do it through low code, no code, and that just opens up, I think, access to take advantage of the power of software, but also means that you really have to change the way you speak about your product. It really influences marketing, go-to-market strategy to put sort of this creativity in the hands of your users and build community around how your users are adopting the product. Eric, I think you're on mute.
Of course, we never learn, do we?
Another trend in the last 5 years is more people on mute on Zoom.
More people on mute when they're trying to speak. Thanks, Kyle. I think that's really helpful. It gives us a really good overview of really like what some of the key trends are, how product-led growth is really impacting this. I want to turn this over to Allison for a minute. You had just mentioned you have so much experience with companies at different levels. You've worked with tons of different executives. I'm curious if you can kind of talk to us about what are some of the discussions that you're hearing about product-led growth, even at the C level, and how product-led growth really serves buyers today?
Sure. So I tend to hear about PLG initiatives in two contexts. One tends to be startups that are beginning with a self-serve motion and then are concerned with layering on an enterprise model on top of that self-serve foundation. Usually in those cases, they're leveraging self-serve as a lead gen mechanism more than a revenue generator in itself. Really, the question is, how do we create some initial mass adoption within a larger enterprise account so that a salesperson can actually go in and pitch, a greater value story to executive buyers and, formalize a corporate level contract. And then, often on the other end of the spectrum, there are often larger companies that are layering in a self-serve motion, after the fact. They might have scaled to be a pretty big company, but now want to cater to a new audience, have launched a new product. Sometimes this happens if you have, a company that's shifting from on-premise to SaaS. And, in other cases, it's, catering to a new buyer. So, the most common question that is discussed in this context tends to be, at least in conversations I'm a part of, tends to be, where are humans involved in self-serve, right? Because I think a lot of founders especially are so excited about like automating everything. Let's, we're software people, let's let software drive our go-to-market. And certainly, software should be like the sort of tip of the spear that we're using and our bias, our default. Let's use software whenever we can. But at the same time, it tends to be that humans actually can be very ROI positive across the self-serve journey in order to drive net dollar retention. So, particularly in situations where, you're looking for, you're looking to drive that NDR, often there are people who were involved in onboarding. For example, I think Superhuman became really well known for this, where, we think of them as being a company very focused on UX. But at the same time, they have onboarding specialists who will actually get on the phone with users for 30 minutes and walk them through a tutorial about how to use keyboard shortcuts. And the founders are, adamant that that was an ROI positive decision for them. The lifetime value of retaining one of these, customers that initially signs up, like the lift in LTV is so high, it justifies that, half-hour call. We're also seeing teams of, product specialists, or sometimes known as like sales assist teams, or really people who are more like user level CSMs. We're seeing them crop up in a lot of companies where their job is to generate product qualified leads, PQLs, by, reaching out to users proactively to help them figure out how to adopt the product more effectively, creating sort of viral flows among users, helping them refer their friends in and use collaborative features, even sometimes like networking to maybe the team leader of a team that's initially using the product, so that again, like they can pave the way for sales to kind of come in and close the corporate level contract. And then certainly like there are sales teams at PLG companies, which is, sort of the dirty secret that I think a lot of earlier stage founders may not be aware of always, that, there are sales folks that come in. So, and then there are separate questions about what are the scaled resources by contrast that you can use in PLG. And I think there have been actually a lot of interesting innovations in this area as well. I mean, I think for a long time we saw, for example, like, thoughtful UI walkthroughs being built. I think a lot of people have like pop-up fatigue at this point. So, but, I think that was sort of like the initial stage of like, how can we kind of like automate guidance in the product? But I've been seeing some really interesting examples of, being able to showcase to users case studies or templates of what similar users have built in a product so that you can help solve like the blank slate problem. As well as even like, triggering automated emails that come from these user level customer success folks to say, hey, like, saw you signed up. If you need help, here are some resources that you can look at, and you can always schedule time with me here. So I think the key question is like, how do we balance this mix of people and then scaled resources to create incredible customer journeys?
I love that. I think it's really powerful that you spoke about like the human element of this, because I think product-led growth definitely has this idea of it's all self-service. That's the whole point. It's all meant to be automated, but really there is such a key kind of human element to all things. And I think most of us kind of want that. So that's awesome. Thank you, Allison. Jess, I want to turn it over to you for a minute, because you being at Starburst, you have kind of firsthand experience with some of these things in an organization. So I'm curious if you can talk us through a little bit of what was Starburst's journey to product-led growth, and really what were some of the patterns that you were noticing about your own buyers that really made product-led growth a kind of a no-brainer for you?
Yeah, sure. So I would say Starburst, even prior to my arrival, was a bit product-led growth to start, because they invested very early in the marketplace option. So being able to list our core enterprise product to be consumed through the AWS marketplace, that was one of the very early decisions in the business. And with limited people and resources, that was an intentional decision to lean into where it looked like people were going to want to buy more and more in the future. So the fact that people could try and consume our product without a major commitment from very early in the business is something that we've kind of taken through our strategy as we've grown. So that would have gone back 3 years ago. We're a 4-year-old business, so we're not an old company, but we have grown very quickly. And so now we are live on the AWS marketplace, the GCP marketplace, the Azure marketplace, HPE, Red Hat, and Alibaba. And for both of those for all of those marketplaces, we now have 2 core products: Starburst Enterprise, which is the original, and Starburst Galaxy, which is our new SaaS product, which is intended to be the holy grail of the product-led growth motion. But as you're saying, Allison, there's a lot of human intervention that's necessary, hand-holding that's necessary as we get started there. So for us, the journey is to be available to as many companies as possible and be available to be consumed in as many ways as possible, researched, tried in as many ways as possible. Tackle's a really strong partner to us in that effort, but that's our goal, is to meet the buyer on any of their terms. And we see that is resonating in our growth numbers and in how much revenue comes through marketplaces today. We have very big enterprise customers who strongly prefer to transact with us through a marketplace that they already have a relationship with. And we have customers who strongly prefer to work directly with us, and that's an option as well. And our new SaaS PLG product, Galaxy, is just giving that many more options to our customers and how they can work with us.
Love that. And I love that you spoke about options too, because hopefully for the folks that are here, you've been hearing from a lot of different, all of the different sessions of all of these different ways to go to market. I think the point is that there should be options. There should be different options for different kinds of buyers, for different ways of selling. It's really important that you are able to meet buyers where they are more than ever, because they have their opinions. They have the things that are going to work best for them. So I think, to your point, Jess, like being able to offer different things for different people is really critical. Awesome. So Kyle, I want to kind of talk to you a little bit. So, you have published so much content, right? Especially being an OpenView, so many content pieces have come from you on usage-based pricing models and product-led growth. What do you think has been maybe one or two of the most interesting like intersections between these three eras of software buying that you've outlined in some of your OpenView content?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I guess the first thing I think about is in a usage-based model, you only get paid at the end of the day when folks see value and consume your product. And so it's kind of the ultimate form of product-led growth. And there's always pushback of like, well, doesn't that mean someone's not making a commitment? Or like, what happens if they churn? Or maybe it's not as predictable in terms of what their spend is going to be. But I think of it as like, if you actually are only being charged if you're being successful with the product, like why would you actually want any other way of being charged as like a user or a buyer? It's a really powerful message that a company stands behind their products and isn't trying to oversell you. There's no shelfware in the business. And I think it's also a great sort of signal for a company that invests really in R&D as a revenue generating expense rather than as sort of a back office function, because anything you do to drive more usage and discovery of more ways of using the product ultimately leads to revenue growth. So very PLG centric. But I think that what's super fascinating about these models is that you start getting into a world where a user starts on self-serve. Maybe they're on a pay-as-you-go plan, a non-committed plan. They're not gated in terms of the features that they can use or the number of people that can use the product. And so an enterprise could actually share a product with dozens of people in an account, even as a free user in a usage-based model. But then as they start to grow their spend, and all of these folks that are now champions of a product can start to bring their workloads on, or start to take advantage of the product for their own specific purposes, and all of a sudden usage and revenue can scale dramatically. And so usage-based business models that pair usage-based pricing and PLG have the highest net dollar retention rates of like any company I've ever seen. There's some challenges around that, right? Like how do you compensate sales in that environment? How do you make sure that you have predictability in your business and you can forecast your business? But to me, those are challenges you can handle. The best thing though is that you're able to deliver a really great customer experience that produces a healthy business model. And I think that's the magic of that intersection between PLG and usage-based pricing.
Really interesting. I think it's so interesting to think about. We refer back to one of the pieces that you wrote a while back on these different areas, of buying, and I think it's so cool to see how all of these, there have been these moments, these eras that feel very siloed, but now we're sort of entering this phase where we can leverage all of these different things kind of together and pair these different areas for even more success, which is really cool. For those in the audience, if you haven't read Kyle's piece in OpenView, it's a great one. So definitely go check it out. Lots of context, I think, for this as well. Jess, let's pick on you for a second. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you've seen with scaling a product-led growth model. I know you mentioned, it's a little bit early, but any like pitfalls or things that you can share with our audience for things that they can watch out for as they start and mature with product-led growth?
Yeah, sure. And I would say we're in the early stages with our SaaS product here. We've learned a lot about the marketplace journey so far, but kind of focusing on the SaaS product Galaxy, our setup is that we had the existing enterprise motion. So that is a typical top-down selling motion. Marketing puts volume in the top, and then it comes through the sales motion to convert at the bottom. So that is something that we've been building and maturing over the last 2 years. And I would say we just got up to a point where we knew a lot about that. We knew a lot about what marketing dollars and channels to spend where to get what we needed at the top, to get the conversion at the bottom, what do we need from alliances, et cetera. So just starting to get some lessons learned and a bit of a playbook set up there, and now bringing this new motion online. This is something you have to mind constantly, because you basically need to create a new function, I think, to dedicate a growth function that's dedicated to PLG and to that product. Because otherwise, if you have the same set of resources on both motions, if you're a business like us, it's too resource constrained. People are constantly making trade-off decisions, and you'll get a slower pace behind your product market fit journey. So I would say if you are pursuing this motion, especially if it's coming in addition to an existing, more traditional sales motion, you really have to think about a self-contained team that can give it the right level of focus. You also have to really focus early days on trying to have your best guess ICP, and then figuring out however quickly you can, testing that ICP, testing the messaging, testing if people want to come and check out this product based on the pain that it's supposed to solve. And then testing the messaging and iterating on that in very small batches while you're standing up the intel that comes through the product, who activates, who converts, et cetera. All of this kind of needs to be minded at once, but I think a contained team of a few people that are focused on it, one that's more product growth, one that might be more the marketing growth side. I think that's essential to getting off the ground successfully, getting that level of focus. I also think, small scale user interviews, a lot can be learned through one-to-one conversations in your early days as you pursue product market fit, versus, just trying to make assumptions and going a little bit too broad. So I think you have to have this really agile mindset. You have to have a fast pace of iteration. You have to really pay attention to the early data. One last thing I'll say that we have been focused on is you obviously have to allow personal emails. There, ideally for me, there would be no forms in the world that allow personal emails, but that's not realistic. People don't want to sign up with their professional information. So you have to figure out how are you going to solve for not knowing who these people are as quickly as humanly possible, and how are you going to solve for that without needing a human to talk to them? Because the ideal end state here is that you don't need as much human interaction. Maybe you do need it to ultimately convert someone or actually expand them, but ideally you could have a system that figures out how to bring people on board and get them active, and you can figure out who they are and match up their demographics or their firmographics with behaviors. So that's a big problem to solve, and you want to focus on that in the early days. We have a solution we adopted recently called Metadata IO, and that's been very helpful to us to identifying the dark funnel, because again, back to the buyers, you have to do everything on their terms. One of their terms is they don't want to give you their information. So how do you solve for that so you can learn faster?
Yeah, the dark funnel. I love that you called that one out too. Absolutely. So I think it sounds like definitely some challenges. I'm curious if you can go into any detail about some of the one-to-one conversations and kind of how those played out, because I think that is an underrated approach. Yeah. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that if you have any additional insight you can share.
Yeah, so we've been running a bit of a pretty consistent questionnaire approach. We've had some workshops in our office where we brought in the friends of the family, basically, who are in this target segment, who we can have very open and honest conversations with. That's not highly scalable, but it's high quality. And then we have basically our trade show approach. So now that physical events are coming back to life, we have people that deploy into the trade show, and sometimes we can preset one-to-one conversations and research interviews, and sometimes it happens more organically. But the most important thing is that you're asking questions consistently, you're testing your hypothesis consistently with that audience. So that's what we've been doing. It's pretty straightforward, I guess I'd say, but it's consistent, and multiple people on the executive team and in the growth team can do this, so we can keep bringing back insights no matter who's being deployed into which forum.
Awesome. Really powerful.
Jumping in on that, one thing that we've learned is just recruiting people in the target market and watching them, like recording their session as they visit the website, like sign up for the product and start using it. And just, you can be silent and just on Zoom as they screen share what they're seeing, but asking them occasional questions of like, hey, does this actually entice you to sign up? Like, what would make it even better? What questions do you have when you get to this page? Like, what would stop you from buying now? When you just try to understand the journey they're going through, I think it gives you so much more user empathy and identifies all of these friction points that you didn't think you had, because to you that like you've optimized everything and it's data driven and it's, you know, the user is following the exact journey that you've set up. In the user's mind, maybe they're missing out on a lot of the context that you have, and maybe they're a low intent user, or maybe they're trying to do something different than what you expected they were trying to do. You just get so much rich information that allows you to make better decisions when you have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that Kyle mentioned earlier. I wanted to bring up too, is like community and their participation in your PLG journey. That's another way to get this user feedback, or, you know, so for instance, we support an open source project called Trino, and there are community events we run for that. And our developer advocates can do this same testing with that market. And so we were assessing the friction in the sign up process, very low. The friction in the activation process, pretty high. You know, companies needed to know who we were and trust us to actually bring their data in to pilot this product. So that was a great lesson that came through the community, and we're actively working on how do we reduce the friction in the activation process, providing dummy data sets and other assets that will help someone not need to, you know, have a high level of trust with us before they try this product.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, I think we have one final question, time for just about one more. This is going to be a really broad one. And Allison, I'll start with you here. Maybe you can share one or two pieces of advice that you would give to new founders who are listening as they start to build their go-to-market.
I'll keep mine quick and reference something that Kyle started talking about. I think choosing your pricing model, and not just the model, but exactly how you price, is one of the most important decisions that you can make as a startup. And it also, unfortunately, is one of the least common skill sets that you'll find among people who work at especially early stage startups. The reality is that you're probably going to revise your pricing model only so many times. And so, you know, as a result, I think people don't have as many at bats at figuring that out as they might with other types of, you know, go-to-market initiatives. There are also not that many people in the industry who have been like pricing experts for a while. They might have been a pricing analyst who subsequently, you know, took on another like more broader role. There are consulting firms actually that can help you with this, and you know, tend to specialize in pricing, and that could be an interesting route. But I think the bottom line is, it's important to recognize that this is potentially a high stakes decision, and one that you may not currently be resourced to support. So I'd recommend, you know, going and figuring out how to make the right decision with the right people.
Awesome. Great one. Jess, what about you? Any advice for new founders?
Yeah, don't be too attached to the end state holy grail of PLG. You know, nothing happens quickly, easily, or the way you think it might. And so you might think you're designing this product, and if you build it, they will come, but it's just not going to happen. Just set your expectations at, we're going to have to work very hard at this to make it successful. And then over time, we'll get there. So I think that mindset is critical. Just the rapid iteration and looking at it differently at different stages. So for instance, one of the biggest benefits of our SaaS product in its early days is that it was one of our top pipeline generation sources for our existing enterprise product. That's still a win. That might not be exactly what we thought it would be, but it's a win in the early days, and it brought customers in that ended up transacting in the other product. So think about it different ways in different periods of time in your journey, and don't get upset if it's not the end state quickly. I don't think anybody has the end state quickly.
Awesome. All right, Kyle, bring us home.
Yeah, and I always tell people, like, Slack has a whole dedicated teams that just work on onboarding new users onto Slack, and they have one of the best user experiences possible, but even they are constantly iterating on it. I think the last thing I would add is just take the time to set up good product analytics, get visibility into what's happening in the product. That's something that you just don't really you're not hearing from these users all the time. You're not talking to them all the time. You need to see what they're actually doing and what activities correspond with success and with folks that, you know, drop out. And so that's something where there's plenty of tools available, but I think upfront work on that pays off a lot down the road.
Awesome. Well, this was a wonderful discussion. I know we're at time. Allison, Jess, Kyle, thank you all so much for being here. We learned a ton. And to everyone else, I hope to see you in the sessions later today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.